Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Infernal Brains podcast. I'm Tars Tarkus from tarstarkus.net.
And I'm Todd Statman from Die Danger Die Die Kill, aka 40K.
And today we're going to tackle the manliest man who ever manned, Dara Singh.
Yes, that's right. Being hyper-masculine He-Men ourselves, we prefer movies with, men with gigantic chests, breaking people in half over their heads. And Dara Sing delivers that in spades.
Yes, he's almost as manly as us.
Yes, almost.
So, for those of you who are unaware of Dara Singh, he is basically a wrestler turned actor who starred in a series of what were called action films or B films in India through the 60s and 70s.
They were called stunt films in India, but they're what we Westerners would basically think of action films, stunt films with a heavy influence of the old serials, that style of action.
Yes, pretend he said what I said. Or I said what he said, yes. Dara Singh, as we mentioned, gained fame through the wrestling circuits. He was born in Punjab, and eventually moved overseas to Singapore and started his wrestling career there, and worked his way through all the wrestling circuits, and became pretty famous locally. And I think he even wrestled some wrestlers from the West. Yeah,
he did. I don't remember the name, but he did have a series of matches with a famous American wrestler. I think that was in the late 60s, though, so that was after he'd already established himself on the screen. One shorthand that I use when describing Dara Singh to other cult movie fans is I compare him to Santo, the Mexican wrestler, even though I don't think there was any influence. Santo didn't have any influence on Dara's career. I don't even know if Santo's movies were shown in India. But just the idea of Dara was a wrestler. I think that Indian professional wrestling is similar to lucha libre and American professional wrestling in that it's more about personalities than it is about athleticism or authentic competition, let's say. And so the stars are especially suited to moving on to film. And so like Santo, who later in his career, as he approached middle age, moved into films and was a star of basically B action and sort of genre films. Dara Singh did the same thing, basically. And like Santo's films, Dara Singh's films, especially the earlier ones, are very much based around his persona as a wrestler and also his abilities as a wrestler. So from the get-go, his films involve a lot of wrestling, and also they bring in a lot of other wrestlers, so there can be plenty of scenes of him wrestling people and using all the proper regulation holds and scissor holds and whatnot.
The only minor difference between Dara and Santo would be Santo will be playing Santo, and Dara will be playing a guy who's mysteriously almost like Dara, but has a different name.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, he wore a lot of different sort of hats in these movies, sort of playing sort of very iconic sort of action movie figures. He started out in these sword and sandal type films, but then later he played like James Bond type spies. He'd play a Zorro-like figure. He played Tarzan a couple times, and we'll talk about a film where he played sort of a Flash Gordon character. But, I think he was so beloved by his fans, the people who came to see Dara Singh's movies were really coming to see Dara Singh. So no matter what he was dressed up as, whatever it was really just a thinly veiled version of Dara Singh. The action you were going to see from movie to movie was going to be very much the same. The characterization and the situations you'd see him in, very much the same from movie to movie.
Sort of like, Schwarzenegger, or, it's the Schwarzenegger film, not the
Yeah.
whatever his character.
He was
John
above.
Matrix or
He was above the title type of star, and the thing about him that's interesting is that he became a really big star in India, but never really moved. Without really moving into being a star of A-level films, he really stayed in the B-movie industry. I think a lot of that because of his sort of humble beginnings, and I think the rigid sort of caste system. But aside from that, he still became a very big and beloved star, though you may not know that today because despite the overwhelming number of older Bollywood films that you can find on DVD, most of Dara Singh's filmography that is available at all can only be found on very cheap VCDs with no subtitles. So being a Dara Singh fan for a non-Hindi speaker is definitely a labor of love. You have to feel very passionate about him to follow his career, which we are, and which we are going to do.
So the first film you need to be aware of as a Dara Singh fan or future fan is 1962's King Kong, which is Dara's first major film role where he co-starred. At this point, Dara didn't headline the films. They teamed him up with a handsome romantic lead character here played by...
Yeah, I don't think they really trusted him at this point to carry the film. So they at this early stage in his career, they really sort of just cast him as the muscle. I think he was still the headline. I mean, I think he was the top billed star. I'm not sure. But yeah, they usually have him around to do the fighting. But at this point in his career, he was never the romantic lead. He wasn't paired up with the heroine. And he never had songs picturized on him, as they'd say, which is the Bollywood tradition of having the actors lip sync songs. The early Dara Singh movies, you don't see him do that, but they would always have a traditional romantic lead type to woo the heroine and to sing the songs. Later on, as he proved himself, became a bigger star and became more of a confident presence on screen, you do see Dara Singh starting to sing songs or lip sync songs. He does romance the leading lady. And he even does like the silly comic relief stuff that was required of, especially in stunt films. There's a lot of comic relief, so be forewarned.
Although he does actually have a girl in this one, but it's more a girl who basically stalks him, and he spends most of the film being annoyed with her.
Yeah, which I think is supposed to be funny. Like he doesn't hit her, but there's one point where he kind of like raises the back of his hand to her, which is hilarious. And that actually the starlet is Kum Kum, who was a item girl in mainstream films and played supporting roles in mainstream films. There were a lot of actors like this who in A-list films were typically like character actors or sort of background players, but in the world of B films would be leading ladies and sort of above the title stars, and Kum Kum is one of those. She was actually a supporting player in Mother India, which is, if you read a lot of dry academic books about Bollywood movies, is considered one of the key films of Hindi cinema. But here she plays the likable heroine who does all of the dance numbers in the film. I think every single song in this movie involves Kum Kum dancing. So when she's not almost being, slapped around by Dara Singh, she's carrying a lot of the film's musical stuff.
So the title King Kong doesn't refer to a giant ape. It's actually more of a title in the film for the greatest fighter in the kingdom.
Right, as decreed by the evil king.
Yeah, and as we begin, the King Kong is an actual King Kong, which is the ring name of a Hungarian wrestler named Emil Sadja, who actually wrestled with Dara Singh in actual wrestling stuff.
Yeah, I think he was sort of like Dara Singh's, main, the one who was like built up as being his main foe or main nemesis, Yeah. And he's a big guy. He looks like that guy. I can't remember his name, but in the guy who plays Borat's manager in the Borat movie.
Yeah.
And you almost see him as naked as you see that guy in the Borat movie. So he's kind of formidable. It's not so much that he doesn't look like he's in really great shape, but he's just kind of this mountainous, very hairy person who makes very disconcerting kind of grunting, jabbering noises while he's wrestling. I'm talking about King Kong here, not Dara Singh.
Yeah.
And then there's another horrifying monster in the movie as well, which is a large, I think this was the first instance of this I saw in a Bollywood movie, of a big man-in-suit monster, actually probably a two-man-in-suit monster, which is a big sort of dinosaur crossed, looks like to me like it's crossed with a cow, and it breathes steam out of its nose. This film was directed by a fellow named Babubhai Mistry, who, in addition to being a director, was a pioneering special effects man in Bollywood films, and he got his start working for the Wadia brothers, who were one of the earliest pioneers of Indian stunt films. I don't think they invented the stunt genre, but they definitely perfected a lot of its tropes. The Wadias also did a lot of mythologicals, which were films based on the Hindu epics. These featured, featuring figures like Hanuman, and these required a lot of special effects to realize the basic, the magical feats of the gods and so forth. So he developed a lot of the early process techniques that were used for special effects in Indian films. And so even in the films he directs, you tend to see a lot of some actually pretty good, for the time. Hindi special effects have kind of gone downhill since then, but the work that Mistry does in his films in the 50s and 60s are pretty much on par with what you see in fantasy films out of the U.S., at least like B fantasy films and stuff like that. So here probably the primary thing we see is this awesome dinosaur that Dara Singh beats up. I think that's sort of the way he proves himself to the king at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, the King Kong is too busy bragging to the king about how he's going to defeat the dinosaur, and Dara Singh just goes up and punches it.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works out, yeah.
And so he's declared the new King Kong, and the old King Kong is all mad, and they wrestle and fight, and as the film progresses, Dara Singh will wrestle and fight a lot of people.
Yeah, and the old King Kong, Emil Zaja, he never really gets over it. He never moves on. With a good therapist, he probably could have put it behind him, but no, he just keeps popping up. And another complication arises in the fact that, unknown to the king, and I think unknown to Dara's character too, this film, again, didn't have subtitles, but Dara is the rightful heir to the throne, being the son of the former king who was murdered by the current king. And I think this is a very standard thing in Dara Singh's movies. A lot of his movies, you'll see him cast as the commoner who is in reality the rightful heir to the throne, and who either doesn't know it at the beginning of the movie and discovers it, or is planning to somehow regain the throne. So whether that has something to do with Dara being a person of humble origins himself, who sort of against the odds, given India's class system, rose up through the system to become a big star, and the fact that the audience for these films was largely a poor and working class audience, and they might have identified with him or thought of him as a hero because of that. I like to. It's neat to say there's a relationship between those two things. I don't know if there is for sure. I can't say, but one wonders, or I wonder at least.
Yeah.
And I'm the one talking, so.
Well, after the initial dinosaur fight in King Kong, it basically becomes people fighting each other as the film progresses. And so most of the big special effects are near the beginning of the film.
Yeah, yeah, it really does. It is kind of a bait and switch because it's you see the dinosaur very early in the movie and you think it's going to be that kind of film.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. There's a lot of fighting in it, and the fighting is pretty good. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff because this being a Hindi film, it's over 2 hours long. It seems like the kind of film, if you're used to watching Western B movies, you'd think it would be, 70, 80 minutes, but it kind of keeps going on. And so, along with all the fights, of course, there are a lot of musical numbers, and there are also a lot of comic relief, as we also mentioned. There's a lot of melodrama involving Dara Singh's mom. There's always, pretty much in every Hindi movie, there's got to be something about the hero and his mom.
Mm-hmm.
And that is true here. Though the action scenes are entertaining, generally.
Yeah, they're pretty creative compared, like they're inspired by the old serial films, which is basically just people punching each other over and over. And here, Dara Singh will throw people and twirl them around, and it's more interesting to watch than the hero get punched in the face 50 times and not even mess his hair up.
Yeah, this one they have 50 people punching the hero in the face once each.
Yeah,
because it's always him against a bazillion people.
And he'll punch once and they'll all fall over.
And they'll all fall down, or he'll pick one up, twirl them around, and throw them into like 12 guys, and all the 12 guys will fall over.
And it's bowling with Dara Singh.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Never gets old, too.
Yeah.
Shall we move on? Okay. One thing that you'll notice about King Kong, because you're watching it right now, is that it has a similarity to the Italian sword and sandal films of that era, or what were called peplums. And that's not an accident. Those films were very popular in India at the time, and the popularity of peplums in India actually goes back to the silent era and the silent machiste films that came out of Italy. These films, I mean, a lot of Italian genre films were popular in India during the 60s. Spaghetti westerns were very popular, which is why you see a lot of Bollywood and Indian stunt films that sort of are influenced by the spaghetti westerns. Yeah, curry westerns, and even the Eurospy films, things like that. One of the reasons these were popular is because they were cheaper for exhibitors to procure, as opposed to the A-list or the A Bollywood films and Hollywood films that the bigger theaters were showing. Which means that they were showing at the smaller cinemas, especially ones that were located in the suburbs and in rural areas, and also in the poorer and working class areas of the urban centers in India. Which means that, these were the exact same screens that the stunt films of the type that Dara Singh made were competing for. So it's not surprising that the makers of these films would try to take on the peplum films on their own turf and to ape some of the sensibilities of those films. In King Kong, it's not quite as apparent. It's pretty apparent, but it also, at the same time, is very identifiably an Indian film and has also a lot of the conventions of Indian stunt films. However, there are other films that Dara Singh made that are so heavily influenced by the peplums that at times they're almost indistinguishable from them, but for all the singing.
Yeah, that'd be the only difference, especially with Samson. It's like you wouldn't know until people start singing. Yeah.
So there were two, as Tarz is going to talk about, there were two films made in 1964, two color films that are I imagine there are more, but of the ones we've seen, I mean, there's hundreds, literally over 100 Dara Singh films, but of the ones we've seen, there are a couple examples that are the most peplum-like, and one is Samson, which Take it away, Tars.
So 1964's Samson is... It was my first Dara Singh film, and it was a pretty good introduction because if you're used to seeing the Peplum films, like it's a nice transition from that to the more Indian style of Peplum films and the stunt films. Basically, it follows the same trope where there's an evil king, and he's got some of his goons are trying bad stuff, and Samson is the heroic guy who will become the king after everything goes through. I'm not sure if he was supposed to be the king and the evil guy overthrew him, but I think that's implied.
Yeah, I kind of lost track of this one.
Yeah,
but there was enough going on in it.
Yeah.
This is a movie where it doesn't really matter.
Yeah,
but
there's
got a lot of visual.
Yeah,
pizzazz.
they threw in a ton of neat stuff to keep you interested. There's elephants. There's people wearing wacky costumes. There's huge battles of hundreds of extras fighting each other while wearing the costumes.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the costumes are like they have salmon and yellow colored costumes that have KKK type points on the top and domino masks. There's the evil wizard has some little people who are colored blue and green.
Color coded dwarfs.
Yeah. And they can shoot flames out of their mouths, or they shoot water out of their mouths. And at some point, they set the town on fire, which is
right. It's like a little model train set town.
Yeah, the Legoville town.
Yeah.
And the best part, in my opinion, is the giant dinosaur puppet, which the king uses to execute criminals. Which at one point he's going to execute the handsome actor character, which Samson then rushes in and horribly murders the giant dinosaur puppet.
Without even, he doesn't even stop to figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
He just kind of, judges by appearances. Actually, I gotta say, that his handsome friend, Samson's handsome friend, is played by Faraz Khan, who was a big He-Man action star and director in the 70s, but was at this point in his career relegated to B movies, and he was sort of playing a very different role to what he would become. He was very much he starred in a lot of curry westerns and sort of the hairy-chested He-Man roles. This one he's sort of a pretty boy, sort of like Shami Kapoor, who was a big star at the time in India, or like maybe like if you're thinking in Hollywood terms, maybe someone like Fabian or Frankie Avalon or something like that. So, but anyway, I don't know who he's supposed to be. Maybe he's the guy that's supposed to be the rightful ruler or something like that. But he and Samson are joined at the hip anyway. Yeah,
but by 1964, they could afford to have more than one of Samson's of Dara's wrestling foes in the film. So this one, there's a whole pack of them. So besides King Kong, there's people named Casey Panda, Tiger Joginder, Sawaran Singh, and a guy named Killer Dara Singh, which I think is supposed to be a separate from Dara Singh.
Right. It might be like the alternate reality evil Dara Singh.
Yeah.
And Casey Panda does sound like a chain Chinese restaurant that you can go to in a mall, I have to say.
At one point, of course, Dara wrestles all of them at the same time, and he wins because he's Dara Singh.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty fun. There's a lot of visuals, a lot of cool stuff, and you don't get bogged down too much with the people talking. There's a lot going on. And even the songs, some of them can be somewhat interesting. If you're one of the people who stays away from Bollywood films because of the songs, it's not, they're not really that bad here.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a huge stumbling block, I think, for a lot of people as far as getting into Indian films is the songs. I mean, I really like the songs, so not a problem for me. But I guess, but you can fast forward through the songs, but I do think you lose something. You're losing sort of the integral part of the overall feel of the movie if you're doing that. But you can do that.
Yeah. You can jump to Hercules.
Hercules. Yeah, another film made in 1964, Hercules. I would say, going back to Samson briefly, that it is. I'd agree. It's a good place to start with Dara Singh's films, and it is very colorful and has a lot of action. And the fact that it's, you know, very similar to Italian peplums, it's sort of a cozily familiar ground for a lot of cult cinema fans. Hercules, same thing. I mean, I would recommend Hercules equally much, except for the fact that the version that's currently available, the quality of the VCD is absolutely awful. It makes the movie look like it was filmed inside a dirty aquarium. But other than that, this was put out by an outfit called Bora Brothers. The director was Sriram Bora. The producer was Ram Kumar Bora. And I think they were sort of a 60s version of the Wadia Brothers, though not as successful, but they did a number of very colorful and very entertaining stunt films and B films during the 60s. And they did another film for Dara called Thief of Baghdad in 1968. Very similar to Hercules. They definitely have a fondness for monsters and cheapo special effects that makes both of those films very enjoyable. But Hercules, very, you know, as you might guess from the title, it shows a very obvious peplum influence. And once again, it involves a nation's throne being seized from its rightful ruler, though it is not Dara in this case, though Dara's Hercules is the one given the task of restoring the rightful heir to the throne. And this being a Hercules movie, that involves Hercules taking part in a series of grueling physical trials, most of which involve some pretty crazy monsters. There's a Hydra, there's a bunch of dinosaurs of different varieties. There's a big ape man. A lot of these monsters, like the Hydra and the dinosaurs, they're not really men in suits. They're actually a lot like the dinosaur thing in Samson. They're big, immobile-looking puppets. So basically, the onus is on Dara to make them look mobile while he's fighting them. It's kind of like if you've ever seen an Indian Tarzan film, of which there are millions. Actually, it's probably most Tarzan films have that convention of the part where he fights with the rubber alligator, and it's just basically a matter of the actor grimacing and wrestling the alligator's arms around. This is the same thing, you know. He sort of grabs hold of the brontosaurus's neck and waves it back and forth, but still very, very entertaining, very goofy. Everything in this movie, the colors are it's got that great sort of saturated, like Eastman color look, I'm guessing. Also in this movie, there is Helen, who is the sort of the queen item girl of Hindi cinema during the 60s and 70s. She shows up and this is a scenario that I think shows up in more than one peplum film, where there's the island of the Amazons who put the love hoodoo on Hercules and his companions, and then it's up for, once Hercules finally wakes up from his love stupor, he has to like shake all the other guys and get them back on point so that they can go and perform the rest of their tasks. And another of the tasks involves Medusa, who isn't pictured as having snakes for hair, which is disappointing, but then she turns into a giant cyclops, which is not disappointing and is pretty awesome.
Sort of makes up for it.
Yeah, it makes up for it in a big way. And then we have this is a standard peplum finale and also a standard Dara Sing finale. We see it over and over again of Dara in chains, and then he breaks free of the chains, and he's in the palace and he's chained to a couple of pillars. So he by sheer might he breaks his chains, and in the process he pulls the pillars down and the whole palace comes down. And you'll see that a lot in these movies. I mentioned Thief of Baghdad earlier. It has a lot of these same scenarios. The Bora brothers, again, they love their monsters. I would recommend Thief of Baghdad as highly as I would recommend Hercules. And as I recall, the VCD of Thief of Baghdad looks a little better. But that has like a giant genie. I think there's a giant cyclops in that. There's some kind of weird giant troll. There's a scene where the giant genie fights the giant cyclops, which means if it was a sci-fi movie, it would have been called Genie versus Cyclops, which I'm hoping someone will make that movie. Anyway, so that's But in a nutshell, or in kind of a large and lengthy and long-winded nutshell, that is two of Dara's peplums, Samson and Hercules.
Yep. And now we'll travel towards later in the 1960s with what is one of the few examples of Indian science fiction films from the 60s and 70s. In fact, the only two I know about that are even available is this one, Trip to Moon, and another one called Waha Ki Log.
Yeah. Science fiction is not a genre that's touched by Indian films very much, at least not mainstream films. Lately, in the last few years, there's been some attempts to make sort of sci-fi tinged movies.
Yeah, more and more, but
yeah, but as far as the 60s and 70s, it seems to be. I mean, stunt films and B movies are sort of the genre ghetto of Indian cinema. You know, the mainstream Hindi films tend to be sort of a hodgepodge of genres, but with the emphasis on sort of drama and comedy and romance. But yes, Trip to Moon is definitely a sci-fi film, but more interestingly, because it came out in 1967, so you think of like when you see Trip to Moon, and sort of keeping in mind that it was made a year before 2001 came out, it seems like it literally is from another planet. It's very much influenced by, you know, the 30s Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers films. You know, it's like an old-fashioned space opera.
yeah.
And it's also a representation of how starting out with these sort of peplum-influenced movies that Dara started in, where he was generally wearing like a furry diaper or a toga or something. As the 60s progressed, they started, you know, putting him in some different outfits, kind of like like a paper doll or something. Let's put a Zorro outfit on Dara for this movie, and this is one where they tried out. Let's put him in a spacesuit.
Spaceman.
Yeah, and kind of a ridiculous-looking spaceman. He actually looks kind of embarrassed during a lot of this movie because the costumes they come up with. It's sort of like looks like whatever they had in the wardrobe from whatever other movies they made.
Like throughout the whole film, there's a lot of things that show up that don't really seem to make a lot of sense unless they were just raiding everything left over from previous films.
Right. Yeah, like there's a rhinoceros on the moon for some reason. There's a big rhinoceros fight. That's sort of the climactic battle, actually. You're waiting for the final big action set piece, and two guys in a rhinoceros costume waddle out, and then Dara Singh dutifully punches it in the face.
Yeah, take that, rhino.
Yeah.
And the other major space thing that shows up when he's on the other planets is there's a robot or two.
Yeah, big, like a classic cardboard box looking robot.
And there's another Dara Singh film which is not available called Rocket Tarzan, which has a giant robot on the poster. And I don't know if this is that robot or if there's a second cool space Indian robot.
I get the sense that pretty much all of the props or costumes in this movie appeared in some movie previous to that. It's like one of those kind of things. It's sort of the white elephant, you know, the white elephant prop room. But and if that robot had not been used before Trip to Moon, I'm sure it was used in later movies. Just like I'm sure that rhinoceros was in a bunch of like Zimbo or Tarzan movies or something.
Yeah, maybe one day we'll stumble across the rhino suit and be like, hey!
Yeah, these movies keep popping up. That's the great thing about old Hindi cinema, as opposed to all these other things that we're obsessed with, like Filipino films and Turkish films. These films tend to just pop up all of a sudden. It seems that a lot of them are still lying around, and it's just a matter of someone finding them in their their storeroom or whatever, and putting out a shitty VCD of them, basically.
There's just so many of them that they have to. There's so many films that they just take so long to get everything out on VCD.
Yeah, definitely. But thank God for the makers of cheapo Hindi VCDs, because otherwise these stunt and B movies from the 60s would be pretty much completely unrepresented. I mean, every once in a while one will come out on DVD. You don't even know why. It's like the Dara Sing ones that are out on DVD. Like King Kong is a classic sort of seminal B stunt movie, but that one's out on VCD. But then something like Aya Tufan, which is a good movie, but it's basically a remake of the American Jack the Giant Killer movie. That's out on a DVD, a subtitled DVD, and I'm glad for it. And then like one of his sort of lesser sort of James Bond movies is out on DVD. It just there isn't really any rhyme or reason to which of these films end up being out there. But Trip to Moon is on VCD, so a lot of the plot is mysterious to us, but it definitely involves. It's not so much an invasion from space. It seems like the moon people are trying to prevent us from invading them, and so they're messing they're messing with the Indian space program. And some of that involves, there's actually a scene where some of the moon people come down and try and push over the rocket on the launch pads, like literally, like, because of course they're played by wrestlers, so there's a bunch of burly moon guys, and they're literally just pushing against the base of this rocket to mess with us.
Makes it sound like the moon people are jerks who just come and push things over.
Yeah, they're like, hey, there, your rocket's on the ground, man. How do you like that? Yeah.
And of course, Dara shows up just in time to punch him.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and of course, they're also kidnapping our rocket scientists, I guess, just to prevent them from making rockets that could go to the moon. But Dara goes to the moon anyway to rescue them or whatever. And then and then it turns into a peplum actually for a while, because there's first of all, because they have a bunch, again, the costuming is like some of the people are dressed like Roman centurions, and some of them are dressed like, I don't know, Turkish soldiers or something. But but then once he's on the moon, he gets captured, and then he has to take part in some sort of gladiatorial trials to prove his mettle, one of which involves him fighting a guy in a gorilla suit. And he eventually wins over the moon people, and then the moon people get in the war with Mars, because as far as I could tell, the king of Mars takes a shine to the Moon King's daughter, who is Dara Singh's love interest, and kidnaps her. And so then there's a lot of going back and forth. This is another. This is a long movie.
There's a lot of talky space politics. And it makes more sense than the Star Wars prequels politics, but it's still as complicated.
It needed a really long scroll at the beginning.
Yeah.
They could have shortened the movie with just like a 10-minute scroll. But I don't know if they were talking about space tariffs and stuff like that. I don't know what part that played in it. But there's definitely a lot. The action definitely makes it seem like Mars and the moon are right next door to each other, because like Dara Singh at one point just straps on a jetpack. He's on the moon, straps on a jetpack and heads to Mars, and he sort of strafes Mars with, he goes all Hiroshima on Mars at one point.
Yeah, the sets are really similar, largely because a lot of the sets are just random interior sets. Like it'll be the Martian Dunder Mifflin office building.
Yeah, some they were trying, some not trying too hard. Yeah,
and right outside will be the gladiatorial events on Mars.
Right.
Like,
Yeah, and it gets a little, over the course of the film's length, that it's pretty much confined to these very small interior sets, some of which aren't dressed that interestingly, and it gets to be a little claustrophobic after a while. Still, there's a lot of fun to be had in the movie. It's just that it wears on you a little, but there's all kinds of fun stuff in there. There's some fun. In this one especially, I think there's some really fun musical numbers. There's that one number where there's a bunch of women parachute out of like a flying saucer, and they're doing a dance number in midair, which is realized through some pretty primitive optical effects, but which looks pretty cool anyway.
Yeah, that's one of the best songs, I think, from these films.
And Helen again shows up in this movie, and she's sort of the the palace dancing girl for the King of Mars. So she has a number in there. But there's a lot of comic relief. This movie has another recurring character in Dara Singh's movie, or actor in Dara Singh's movie, is an actor named Master Bhagwan, sometimes just billed as Bhagwan, who always plays Dara's comic relief buddy. I think he was in King Kong as well, and he's in this, and he gets a lot of screen time. You know, someone who I don't think is in any of these movies, I think she's in Samson, actually, is Mumtaz.
Yeah, she's in that one.
Yeah, who was actually Dara's leading lady in a lot of his films. I think she was in 15 or 16 of them. The reason for that being, I just want to touch on this very quickly, is that there weren't a lot of lead level actresses in Bollywood that were willing to work with Dara Singh, and that was because of his low caste origins, and it wasn't deemed a good career move for these actresses to appear alongside him. And so because of that, you'd see a lot of the same actresses paired with him over and over again, and one of them was Mumtaz, who was also really young at the time. I think in some of these movies she's like 14 or 15. But she very shrewdly built up her career working in B movies throughout the 60s, and then in the 70s she became a very popular leading actress. So she is someone you're very likely to see if you watch one of these movies, and also, unfortunately, Bhagwan is someone you're very likely to see.
Yeah.
Fun movie, just keep your hand on the fast forward button.
Yeah, do something else while it's going on.
Yeah. Check your Twitter while you're watching it.
Yeah, you'll easily see when to switch back to pay attention to the movie, because something goofy will be happening.
Right, there'll be a robot or a rhinoceros or something like that, or someone trying to push a rocket ship over.
Yeah, probably it's worth tracking down.
Yeah, definitely.
And so there are many, many other Dara Singh films, and we'll probably do more on Dara Singh once we track down more cool stuff to talk about.
Yeah. The good thing about being a fan of Dara Singh is that there's always going to be stuff you haven't seen. I mean, I've seen I don't know how many of his films I've seen. I've seen quite a few, but I still have a stack of those VCDs that I haven't even made a dent in yet. But I would say to you, novice Dara Singh fan, no one who listens to this podcast is allowed to not become a fan of Dara Singh after listening to it. But I think, I might regret this later, but I think all of these films that we discussed would be a pretty good starting point. I think they're all pretty enjoyable, with the caveats we mentioned about them being long. If you're squeamish about song and dance numbers, you should get over it. But if you can't, you be forewarned that there's a lot of that in these. So
yeah, it seems like it'd be singing and dancing would take you out, but it fits with these films more than just the regular Hollywood-looking films, because in there it seems more out of place. Yeah,
I mean, these are all, the musical numbers tend to flow in and out of the action pretty well, and are often actually are driving the action, or driving the narrative forward. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of my favorite ones actually involve Helen. One in Hercules and one in Thief of Baghdad, where she does a pretty much identical number, where she does sort of a dance with daggers, while Dara Singh, it's in the scene where Dara Singh is chained up to the pillars, and Helen is singing the song and dancing around with these daggers and doing all these kind of sort of threatening yet sexy gestures with the daggers. So highlights. I guess we're Dara Singh'd out.
Yeah. So until next time, your assignments are to track down Dara Singh films and watch them. And we'll be back soon with more episodes of the Infernal Brains, with more cult movies from around the world that you never knew that you needed to see.
Thank you and good night.
Yep.